If we open the school books on the pages about the ancient history of America, we'll read about primitive tribes that were hunting buffaloes, tilling the land again in a primitive way, and all that was going on in complete isolation from the other continents. Furthermore, we were being assured that they were so simple that they didn't even know the wheel. Also, we are being provided with misleadingly incomplete information about what kind of people lived there and how did they dress. Yes, there were people like this, but also other people. This video is for those who wish to know the real history of America before it is sifted. This interesting artifact is exhibited in the Museum of La Paz, Bolivia. It has got two types of writing on it. One is either Sumerian or something very close to it, and the other one is yet unknown pictogram writing style. Just to remind you, according to mainstream popular history in this region, there was no writing at all except the Kipu writing. This is Kipu, writing with knots and ropes. And then the next nearest writing systems, according to mainstream history, would be this, the Mayan, Olmec, Aztec, and so on. Which is kind of interesting because the artifacts of other types of writing found in America number in hundreds, if not in thousands. In the Tayos cave of Ecuador, numerous tablets were found with unknown writing. And not only one, in the caves, a great number of artifacts were found that had clear connection with the ancient cultures of Europe and Asia. There were many gold tablets as well within this finding. These artifacts clearly do not belong to any of the cultures that are listed in the school books on America. And the Taos cave findings are not isolated case. For example, the priest Father Crespi collected amazing artifacts. They numbered thousands. Unfortunately, most of his collection mysteriously burned down. Basically, he was a very good man and he won the trust of the local people because of doing good things for them, and they started gifting him old artifacts. Many of those artifacts showed clear connection with the so-called Old World. And that shouldn't be a surprise, because the tribes in America are well aware about their brothers on the other side of the ocean. They have recorded an arrival, for example, one of the arrivals is from Aztlan. This Aztlan could very well be Atlantis, because even the Mayas in Popol Vuh and few other codexes, few other places mention that the people in Aztlan suffered a terrible disaster and flood and fled from their land. And also these people gave them culture and according to Mayas themselves built many wonderful cities. Sylvan Morley has recorded ancient Mayan history where they themselves, the Mayas, tell us that some of their white brothers came from Atotlan, and that was on the other side of the ocean. The Atlantic Ocean In Popol Vuh there are even more detailed descriptions that not only people came from across the ocean, but regular connections were also maintained. The tribes in Guatemala say that even in most adverse conditions, they will never forget their white brothers who came across the ocean from the east and built these wonderful cities here. And these brothers from across the ocean left many artifacts behind them. Over time, hundreds of them surfaced in the state of Michigan. Another group of artifacts were found by Russ Burroughs some 2 decades ago in Illinois. All of them are denied proper scientific study because they do not fit in the history that is being preached in school. And the mass media spite propaganda was launched against them, saying that they could be forgery. Of course they could be, as every other artifact in every other museum can be questioned without any grounds as well. But especially the legitimacy of the Michigan tablets is very hard to dispute because they were found by completely different groups of people and they documented their findings in the most reliable for that time fashion. Namely, they would take the 10 most respected men of the area or the village where they were building, and those men were standing observing that indeed there was an ancient mound being opened and inspected, and after that they would sign that yes, I was present and I observed that this was not some forgery, but these were real artifacts excavated from the earth. By the way, this is the most interesting scene from a Michigan tablet. Here, a history lesson is depicted in an ancient classroom. I bet that the kids at that time were much better informed than our kids. Moreover, the Michigan findings were found along with countless thousands of other artifacts connected with the ancient mining, again connected with Europe. So, in that case, forgery is almost impossible, taking into consideration the very number of the artifacts found. These precious findings from Michigan were exhibited for some time labeled as hoax in an official museum. That was the way to get them out to the public, and I like the label that was placed in that exhibition. It said, if you know of other findings or other people that are still finding such artifacts in Michigan, please do tell us. So on one side, the organizers of the exhibition say this is a hoax because that's what they are supposed to say in order to organize it. And on the other hand, they are asking if you know of other findings, please tell us. And as you can see, a lot of the stuff is straightforwardly Egyptian. This is found in West Virginia, same writing as we saw in Ecuador and in Illinois and many other places. So these are definitely not isolated artifacts. This is from El Salvador. And if you feel that you need to see real pyramids to get convinced about the Egyptian presence in America, here they are. And as we covered earlier, the parallels between the building styles of ancient America and Egypt are too many to have evolved without any connection. Even minor details like the inward slanting angle of the walls is the same in both cultures on the both sides of the ocean. What to speak of the polygonal masonry, that is extremely complicated style of building that we cannot even replicate now? How come people were using it on both sides of the ocean and the mainstream historians are trying to assure us that they had nothing to do with each other? The Mayan arches bear remarkable resemblance to those of Ziggurat of Ur in Iraq. Look at the tool marks left on the rock quarries in South America. Well, the Egyptians were using the same tools. And yet another artifact with Sumerian-like and other writings, Egyptian-like writings, this time found in West Virginia, in a mound, burial mound. There was a lot of Old Hebrew writing in the Michigan artifacts, and here are some from Ohio as well. Minoan style pendant found in Ohio. This is interesting. Sumerian writing found near a portrait of something that looks like the Lady of Elche. On the right you see the artifact found in Utah, United States, and on the left is the famous Spanish figure. Now this really looks like a kangaroo to me, and it was found in South America. Another interesting pre-Columbian artifact from that region are houses, 4 or 5 stories high. Also their style doesn't look like it belongs to the civilization that mostly lived in South America. Maybe these were depictions of some European or Asian houses. Apparently people were well connected in those times. Now specialists observed that this stela could not have been made with any stone or copper tools, chisels, or anything primitive like that, so the question arises, how did they make it? Now this artifact was dug out in Patagonia, and yet it shows the writing of Semitic origin. This is a very interesting parallel between the writing system of the Indus Valley of India and Pakistan and that of Eastern Islands of Chile. In the background is the Eastern Island writing and on the front is the Indus Valley writing. Now you remember the interesting Michigan artifacts. They were centered around a mining society. Copper was mined there. Big natural chunks of copper are found over there. This is an example of a big one weighing 3 tons. So many artifacts were found that even they had to build a small local museum. Many archaeologists were involved. It was difficult to cover up the full thing, so they had to come up with some sort of explanation. What is this all about? So the explanation they fabricated is like this. All this was done by some ancient tribe of hunter-gatherers, people who didn't even have homes. They were not yet advanced enough to have a settled life or any agriculture or any culture as such. And yet these people who didn't even have ceramics, they were supposedly manufacturing in industrial quantities these advanced tools, moreover in European style. These wild people didn't have any forks or plates or anything, and yet they were melting and pouring metal and shaping it in sophisticated tools. Pouring in what if they didn't have any vessels? Even many mainstream archaeologists frankly say that they find such dating to be ridiculous. And yet this is a vivid example how the school history doesn't even represent the opinion of even most mainstream historians. Link number 29 in the description points towards a nice lecture that explains the truth about these European actually settlers that were mining copper there in the antique America. Something else very interesting to watch is the work of Jim Vieira and Fritz Zimmerman about the enormous megalithic mounds found in large quantities all over America. The culture that was building those is also absolutely ignored and excluded from the school books of America. And it was the same culture that was building the same structures all over Europe as well. This photo is from Europe. The reason for ignoring full cultures, even when there are plenty of artifacts left from them, is that these cultures belonged to the people that survived from the old advanced civilizations. These people still had the technology to freely travel between continents. But the modern parasitic paradigm is trying to trick the people into thinking that the only way to have advanced technology and civilizations is to comply with their ideas and their parasitic way of life of pollution, war, lies, and violence. And all traces of advanced civilizations that could travel between continents and build amazing megaliths are simply ignored as much as possible. Here we see a blonde boy amongst the Maori people. This is an old photo. This doesn't naturally occur in their race, but it happens because people were coming, people from Atlantis, or in America they called it Aztlan. They were mixing with the locals, they were helping them. There was a tribe in Dakota called Mandan Indians. They are now wiped out, but travelers who were in America a few centuries ago described some of the members of this tribe as light-haired and blue-eyed people. So apparently there were tribes of all races. Now this multi-racial tribe situation doesn't at all suit the fabricated history that is being preached in schools, and that's why all kind of clever methods are devised to distract the attention of the general public from the actual truth. And if one starts talking about Caucasian people in ancient America, that is immediately followed by loud screams that are supposed to make the Caucasian people feel guilty and feel that they are robbing the natives out of their glorious history. In reality, it is the history fabricators who are disrespecting the history that the native people are keeping about their white brothers. The history fabricators are working hard to erase the memory of everybody of the times when the native and Caucasians were friends. The parasites have driven the Native Americans in reservations and have simply stolen their land. On the other side, they are actively trying to convert all Caucasian people into their parasitic paradigm and scam them into believing that the only path towards progress is plundering most shamelessly the riches of other races and then bombing their countries to death and destruction. And while all that is going on, we are cutting everybody together, led by the parasites, cutting the very branch that we stand on by poisoning the very planet we live on. The only way to put an end to this suicidal path of ours is to get back to the old ways, the ways that were shown to us by the survivors of Atlantis and Hyperborea. When those survivors arrived in America, they taught their knowledge of amazing megalith building and many other things to the locals. They did not kill or plunder the locals. And the genes of Viracocha, his descendants, can still be found amongst the nowadays Peruvians. You see the girl with the blonde hair? Some more blue-eyed Peruvian gods. Again, the color of the hair of the mummies fully corresponds to the statuettes found in this culture. Do you notice the blonde beards of the men? And as usual, Atlantis/Hyperborea fashion band on their forehead. Well, the last few photographs were Caucasian mummies from Peru, but it's not different in North America. Pizarro wrote about his experiences with the Incas in Peru, and apparently he met white people ruling over there. Unfortunately, as usual, the original of his writings is not available. It has disappeared. Only copies are available. But even after undergoing parasitic edition, here and there some useful information does transpire in his writings. He also mentions that there were many fine hotels, for example. Question arises, who could have built hotels that would appear to be very fine according to the taste of a refined Spanish gentleman of that time. Some other sources quote him telling that he found some 500 of the Caucasian Inca gods still well and living amongst them. As we will see later on, all of the books written at the time when supposedly America was discovered for the first time, were not to the taste of the history fabricators, and that's why they were all quarantined. And later on their originals all disappeared and only edited copies are available nowadays. This is an old painting of fair-skinned Inca rulers, Inca kings. Now these are very old photos of Native Americans. They don't look like belonging to the red Native American race, and I think that's absolutely normal because we saw so many artifacts of cultures from all over the world and mummies from people from all over the world. We'll see also African in a while. So all these races, they came with their artifacts, they mixed with the local people. It was really, as every other continent, pretty much international place. Some Seminole Indians in their traditional outfits, they look as if they have come straight from Europe. The double-headed eagle, that is one of the main state symbols, the emblem of the Empire of the Survivors, that we'll review in the next few episodes. Now, this is a very, very interesting archaeological site in Brazil. The stones of which this wall is made are some 30 by 40 meters. Some of them are 40 meters long. I don't even know, is this from the earlier waves of the survivors, or is it something even pre-survivor time? For example, this inscription is found in that region of Brazil, but the Brazil regions are rather large, so it doesn't necessarily mean they're connected. It's almost impossible to find any information about this place. I found out about it from a Russian website where I found its location on these maps. They also had a couple of photos of it and a short reference, and recently they removed even that. They removed the photos and the reference links. I tried to find it on Google Earth. I'm not sure I did, but at least I found the region. I don't even know what is the name of this site. As far as I understand, there is a nature reserve near it, or it is included in the nature reserve, where tourists are taken, but I see a lot of touristy photos from nearby locations. I'm getting the impressions that they are not even bringing the main groups of tourists over here. This is the tourists' information that is available, and I guess that is what they show, formations that are nearby and look natural. When I say look natural, I'm showing kind of doubt, and I'm doubting because it's kind of an odd that somebody would make a wall like that just out there in the wild and that there is nothing else around it. Moreover, it really becomes clear after looking at the pictures that some sort of terrific force destroyed, kind of bombed this site, this wall. Stones don't break naturally out of erosion in this fashion. So who knows, maybe the other very interesting stones in the vicinity are simply leftovers of that bombing. And by the way, there was the same gigantic wall in India. I had the link, but after my old computer gave up, I lost that link. So there is another wall like this as well on Earth in India. Similar situation can be encountered at many megalithic sites in South America. We see the chaotic small stone primitive Inca masonry around amazing polygonal masonry. This scene is a perfect example of the contrast between the building techniques that were brought by the survivors to South and North America and everywhere else in the world. But since the Incas and basically all other tribes were building in this primitive fashion, can we really categorize them as primitive altogether? Actually, it depends on the point of view. From the point of view of the survivors who landed there, yes, the tribes could have been somewhat primitive, but only from the point of view of technology. But compared to us, the modern people, the general modern people nowadays, the tribes that we call primitive were actually in some aspects more advanced than us. And again, by tribes, I mean the tribes that were primitive in relation to the survivors. The thing is that the astral perception of those tribes, of those people, was far more developed than that of the modern person. Actually, most of us nowadays barely even know what is this. It is vaguely present somewhere there, and maybe the closest term we have is intuition.
Só alegria. Só alegria. Só por cima. Só na frente. Só na frente.
The modern people nowadays have been artificially forced into a small tiny box of existence, which is a part of the existence as well, but it is extremely limited. Furthermore, they are getting daily, hourly assurance by the mass media that there is nothing outside this box, so don't you think about venturing out there. But the tribal people were well aware and well connected with the worlds outside of this box. Those people were regularly in touch with beings from the other layers of existence. Modern people are also fully capable of having astral experiences, and they do. A very good example are the near-death experiences. There are thousands of them, and they are very well documented by reliable doctors. Countless people, while their body is in the state of clinical death, report seeing things, seeing what is happening, and after that it has been very well verified that indeed they report seeing details that they shouldn't have known about if they were really just their body. The research done in this direction is vast, it is well documented, and it is well available to the public. But since most people are too busy watching volleyball, soccer, or working day and night like donkeys, they simply don't bother to pay attention to the vast research done on the astral world. They ignore it, prompted by the mass media, which convinces them that all that simply doesn't exist. And so, most modern men spend their entire life plunged into deepest ignorance about who they are actually. When they come across an astral experience that happens to them or to their near people, they classify it in the box of unexplained mysteries and continue with their life of blindness about the astral world. These are some of the beings that the Mayan people encountered and depicted them on their artifacts. But since the mass media is hourly convincing the people that there is nothing astral out there anyway because it cannot be, this is what they're showing to the tourists from the place where these artifacts were found, and total silence about the astronaut images. I myself spent some year and a half with the wild tribes in the Amazon forest, and it was the period of most intensive learning in my entire life. I saw things that I didn't even hope or imagine I could see ever in my life, although I was into yoga and spiritual practices since childhood. The feeling I got is as if my entire life before that I simply walked with closed eyes. Everybody can start using their astral vision within this lifetime, but not until they continue watching TV. Constant listening to the so-called facts presented by the mass media will wipe out not only your memory about the real history of the planet that you are born on, but also the memory of who you are actually and the amazing capabilities that you possess. After the short break, let's get back to the artifacts. This is the Chaco culture on the territory of current New Mexico. The architectural style is strongly reminiscent to that of the Old World. And so are the dwellings of the Anasazi Indians from current state of Utah. And now we are in Peru, South America. These are the remains of the dwellings of the Chichapoya people, the red-haired Caucasian mummies that we saw earlier. Their buildings also remind us of the Kurgan style building in Europe, for example. And also we saw earlier the parallel with Great Zimbabwe archaeological site. Now William Niven, he discovered a whole new culture very near to Mexico City, some 30 kilometers. It had its own pictographic writing. It had very impressive buildings. You see the wall now, it's quite high. See the small person for comparison. So in other words, those people were quite advanced. He collected some 40,000 artifacts from the location. That is quite a solid museum by itself. And what happened after that? The artifacts are no longer available. Some of them are in museum vault in US, others are in private collection, and yet others are nobody knows, and at the end they're not available for research. Their photos are barely available. I could find just 2 or 3. Basically that full culture didn't fit in the picture that they're trying to impose upon us about the primitive Indians banging their heads with stones. Very typical situation, artifacts missing, the full culture not included in history, no mention in mass media, history channel and things like that, and at the end, basically people don't know about it. Now the full topic of elephants in America in the ancient art of South and North America is extremely uncomfortable for the mainstream so-called historians because they simply shouldn't be there. The primitive Indians shouldn't know about these things. There were no elephants in America, nor there are now. People were traveling freely in that time. They were well informed. They were in touch with Africa. They knew very well about elephants, and that's why they depicted them all over America. This one is from South America. This one too, it belongs to a Tiwanaku artifacts collection. Amongst many other absolutely legitimate artifacts, same style. This is from the Michigan, Illinois collections. This one again, South America, Peru, I believe. The Mayas even used the elephants in their writing. And the elephant connection is just one out of the many, proving the regular, well-established connections between both Americas and Africa. The famous Olmec heads, featuring obviously African features. Also, the people were depicting on their paintings people of the corresponding color. There were black colored people in America as well, along with the red Native Americans. Aztecs are now completely or almost completely wiped out, but this is how some of them used to look like. And not only Africans, races from all over the world were coming and going in America all the time. These are Chinese Olmecs. And this is a girl that, one of the many Asian looking girls that I met in the Amazon forest. Popol Vuh, the historic book of the Maya Quiche people from Guatemala, describes in this manner the newcomers from across the Atlantic Ocean. They lived together. They came in great numbers. Some of them were white, others were black people. They had many different classes and various languages. It was amazing to just listen to them, but their speech was the same. So on one side Popol Vuh says they had many languages, and on the other side it says that their speech was same. So obviously they had some common language that all of them knew, or maybe they meant that their writing was the same, something like that. The traveler James Churchward observed that some Japanese and certain American tribes can understand each other without translators. The anthropologist Carlos Villanueva noticed something very interesting. A tribe from India called Nagas that lives in India in Asia has a language that is very similar to the Yucatan native Maya Indians, and the similarity is 90%. Many similar facts are recorded in this book by Professor Gilberto Zapata Alonso. One of the beaches in New York, Brighton Beach, is fortified with remains of ancient megalithic structure, or maybe even town, a city. Most likely it simply didn't fit what it is currently preached as history of America, and to avoid questioning, which is not allowed, questioning of this version of history. It's not allowed to mention that it is even one of the versions about history. So probably the megaliths were simply removed out of sight, as if they never existed. More footage of them you can find in my video, Planet of the Megaliths. I hope you are already asking yourself the question, how on earth did this history of America that we find in the school books even come to existence? It doesn't fit neither the history that the native people have about their past, neither the artifacts that are found all over America. How did it even appear? Well, the official story of the history of America appeared like this. It was composed by chaps like this one, Diego de Landa, merciless murderer, who destroyed countless precious artifacts of the culture and history of the native people, throwing them in the fire together with the people. And after destroying all that he could get his hands on, he sat and started writing the history of America. And of course, all his literary compositions are now taken to be pure truth without the need of any verification. It is his books exactly that are the main cornerstone of the mainstream current history of America. In the 17th century, the military forces of the Reformation reached America. The European Reformation was most cruel war. It was a pure military action against the real history and the old paradigm of peaceful existence of the people. It is very mistakenly represented nowadays as some sort of movement not to have church bells and organ music and to have the Bible translated into modern German. And because of all these intellectual ideas, the population of Europe was largely wiped out, means cruelly killed. And those same military forces arrived in America with the same intention, to destroy all old books, old knowledge, and old artifacts, and to introduce with force their new parasitic paradigm. No wonder that their prime target were the old books and the old artifacts. Their job was much easier in America. They managed to kill large amount of people, especially the keepers of the truth, so there was nobody to speak anymore. The fabrication of the history was just in the hands of few chosen people, and that was very easy to manage. They were explained, they were told what are they supposed to write and what they should not write, and that's how it was done. There were Caucasian people, Christians, living in America long before the arrival of Columbus. So it is not that the European people as such caused out all this. It was the Reformation process. This is what they wrote. The Caucasian people from Europe that came with the Reformators were very peaceful, godly, good-hearted people and compassionate, but it was all those strange natives, native Indians, who for some unknown reason were trying to fight them. Strange. Invaders are coming, stealing their land, killing them, burning their artifacts and all that. And isn't it strange that the Indians were fighting back? Well, that's how it was presented in the earlier writings of the so-called historians. And well, the patience of the good reformators, that's how they present the things. When they run out of patience, they started, well, killing the Indians. How sad! Well, not all native Indians were killed. Some of them survived, and the compassionate reformators took such a great care of these people. They gave them blankets to get covered in the cold. And how? What a bad luck! And again, so strange, the native Indians started dying after using those blankets. Well, they were infected with disease. US was formed in year 1776, and that is right after the last pieces of the empire of the survivors were swallowed by the newly formed country at that time called Russia in Europe, and that we will cover in the next few episodes. Before that, both the American continents were officially territory of this empire. Later on, as the time went on, and people who were living witnesses of these events died, later on the history was shifted to look completely different. That US got its independence from England. Indeed, at this time, the England could finally start influencing the American territories, not stopping to influence them. When USA was initially formed, it was basically consisting of free people who still had the survivor lifestyle, more or less, although in a very eroded form. And that is why the people at that time had much more freedom than they have nowadays, when the parasitic paradigm has been successfully installed in the society. Even though the empire of the survivors ceased existing at that time as a country, still the people were the same, and many of them were fighting for their old values. And that is why even the official takeover of the continents by the parasitic forces was not instant. For example, Alaska remained a long time under survivors' control, so to say, even though their country was devoured by Russia, which was a newly manufactured country designed to swallow some territories of the last pieces of the survivor empire, not the full empire. So at that time, the Romanov dynasty, who were insurgents and placed on the throne in Russia by the West European cunning politic maneuvers, they of course agreed to simply give Alaska to United States as they were ordered. That's why they were placed there, to fulfill orders. Now this is a very interesting atlas, part of Encyclopedia Britannica, the most authoritative print in London at that time. And here they depict various continents with excellent accuracy. You can see even the tributes of the Amazon River are very accurately depicted, although it is extremely difficult to get there even nowadays and make an accurate map on the ground. I mean, if you do it on the ground level. So they could send scouts out there in the heavily flooded areas of the Amazon, but what we see in North America, it says with big letters, parts undiscovered. Really, what was stopping them to go over there? Was it the reed boats of the native Indians? I doubt that very much. What was stopping them was still some military forces left from the empire of the survivors. That's why they could not get access there still. Small part of the native inhabitants of the continents remained alive after all these horrors caused by the Reformation military forces. And to wipe out their memory completely, they were freely provided with alcohol. After accepting the parasitic paradigm, now they are freely invited to share its fruits. Popol Vuh is a Mayan old codex that is often cited as historic record as well. But please be careful. The original is again missing. It seems it was uncomfortable for the history fabricators because in Popol Vuh were very clear descriptions how the native Indians were connecting with their Catholic uh, kings overseas from the east across the ocean. Such references were unbearable for the reformators. That's why I don't know if they get their hands on actually editing this book, but surely they declare that all Christian references in it must be later on added. When I say Catholic with F, please don't confuse it with the Catholic. The original Christian faith before it got divided into Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and all kinds of other editions was called Catholic, which means the right one. Another frequently quoted source by those who are trying to impose this Scaliger history in America is the work called Historia Verdadera de la Conquista de la Nueva España, written by a member of the crew of Cortés, Bernal Diaz. The first-hand witness accounts of this crew member are often quoted as proof of the validity of the fabricated Scaliger history of America. Let's see what is the real situation. First of all, although full Europe was supposedly brewing with excitement for the supposed discovery of America, it took them 100 years, according to the Scaliger timeline anyway, it took them 100 years to finally print out the book. Very strange. Why did they keep it locked up for such a long time? Maybe because it didn't suit the stories that they're selling to the people. Another question that arises is, where is the actual original? Because what was printed out was honestly mentioned to be with corrections. A few things were incorrect, so they were corrected before the book was printed out. What does this mean? And most importantly, where is the actual original? The book that was printed out appears to be written by a professional writer, person with lots of experience in writing books. It doesn't suit the language of a crew member of a ship. It seems that the correction that they confess making seemed to be rather major, and God knows what was in the real original. Las Casas was another Spanish priest who wrote his observations during the time of Cortés and is often quoted by the Scaliger supporters as again a genuine first-hand witness. So what about the original again? His work was published 400 years after it was written, although the society at that time in Europe was jumping with excitement to find out what was going on. The main body of his work was quarantined in Spanish archives without any access and was denied any study for all these 400 years, while other works of his, minor works that did not contradict this Scaliger version, were printed much earlier. By the way, his originals are still isolated till date. Nobody even knows what is really original, and some of them are not printed until now because they need to be corrected. Another author that is often cited as a witness to the events of the discovery of America was actually born much later on, and if he wrote something, he must have heard it from the stories that were already seeded in the society. I have never owned a TV set myself, but sometimes I visit people who have, and I will never forget a very moving documentary that I saw at somebody else's house. And the documentary was about the Hopi Indians. There was still one very old lady alive, and she was telling her first-hand witness of the time when people were living traditionally. The normal lifespan was 120 years. The members of the tribe would still maintain their vitality, very good looks, teeth and hair for all this time. When the so-called advanced people from the government came, they very brutally instituted the new rules, the new beliefs that the Hopis were obliged to accept, and also chemical poisons were mandatory introduced. Well, they were called medicines, modern medicines, and within one single generation, the Hopis degraded and became like the rest of the world, aging early and having a lot of sicknesses. She also remembered that those who refused to accept the new beliefs were simply killed. The most knowledgeable people, the shamans, and those who were most expert in maintaining the connection with the benevolent gods were killed. That is an excellent example about how quickly the human body is designed to adjust to new paradigms. As soon as the Hopis started believing in the new things that they were poisoned with the new beliefs and accepted the chemicals, within one generation they degraded. Their bodies degraded. And the same will apply on our way back now that the humanity has started slowly taking the turn towards the old beliefs, towards the old paradigm. Once we stop believing in the parasitic ideas about existence and we stop being administered chemical poisons from the skies and within our food and water supply, the changes can come very fast within one generation. This Caliger version of history assures us that the native Indians didn't know about the wheel and were not using it. Very strange that many toys were found all over the American continents that run on wheels. This is a very interesting site in Chile. A full valley is covered with geopolymer blocks, or you can prefer to call it cement or concrete or beton, whatever you wish. Well, I wonder who made that. Needless to say, there is not even a mention of it in the official history of the Americas. And this is also in Chile. Similar site is located in Thailand. Again, it seems that the full beach is covered with concrete slabs. And another location, this time in Azerbaijan. This is the protected site of qobustan. I could not find convincing photos, but people who have been there claim that this plateau on the top is covered with absolutely even concrete cap. Also, the familiar cup marks, same like those of Sodom and Gomorrah, are found on the site. Was bombing going on here as well, same like Sodom and Gomorrah? Also, the stones seem to be molten, that have melted for some reason. This is again qobustan. And also this is a UNESCO protected site, means even the country itself cannot dig there and conduct any research because it is protected. And that by itself may mean something because it is in the protection list because of some old paintings in the vicinity, but there are such paintings all over the world and they are not protected. It's hard to say if this is all ancient, all these things, but the fact that here we see a broken piece of a regular shape suggests something like that. So the Thailand beach and the qobustan plateau are the only locations that are similar to the Chile Valley, and there is another one that I lost the link to, but it is in Russia, and that one is also definitely covered with concrete slabs, large area. The inhabitants of America were always in touch with the full world, basically. They were very well aware about the different religions that existed everywhere on the earth as well. This is a most excellent example from Patagonia. It's probably from the time when Christianity and Islam were still one single religion. That's why their symbols are depicted together. Same applies to the official flag of the Mi'kmaq Nation from Canada. The crescent symbol is very often depicted on the shields and other attributes of the native warriors. It doesn't mean that they were Muslims in the sense that we understand it today. These were old times. At that time, Christianity and Islam were still one, and these were not only religious symbols, they were the symbols of the empire of the survival, the national symbols of the country. The Christian cross was another of the main symbols of the native Indians. That wouldn't stand very convincingly as proof just by itself because the cross is a very simple design and could have arisen separately, independently, but in conjunction with all the other artifacts that we see, it takes completely different meaning. And this is how the Mayans depicted the crucifixion scene in their Codex Nuttall. Please pay attention to the Christian cross that is depicted below the figure. Again, Mayan depiction with the crescent symbol. This is the map of Tenochtitlan belonging to Cortes himself, and over the city of the natives we see a clear flag with the double-headed eagle, the same double-headed eagle that was the symbol depicted even on the chests of the Roman emperors and is still on the emblems of many countries even nowadays. A 16th century map by Giovanni Vespucci showing the double-headed eagle, the main symbol of the state symbol of the Empire of the Survivors, over the Americas. We are being repeatedly assured that all this stuff is colonial, it must be colonial, but sometimes when we see the Cyrillic letters on these artifacts, maybe that's not true. This is a Geronimo elder of the Chirichahuan Apache tribe. There is a very interesting book that tells us about the Christianity on the American continent before the arrival of Columbus and all that. It is called the Book of Mormon. But because this book does not agree at all with the Scaliger version of history that is being preached in the schools, that's why it is declared by the modern so-called historians as having no historic value at all. Actually, the book was written exactly at the time when the new history was being implanted in the society, the Scaliger version of history, and is kind of a mixture of old sources, but there is also a bit of Scaliger fantasy inside it. So it is a very curious writing from a historic point of view. This is yet another trick that is applied to books that do not follow the Scaliger fantasies. They are declared as having no historic value. These are absolutely genuine Tiwanaku artifacts from the Tiwanaku culture found amongst the others. This is definitely pre-Columbian, and you see the devil. Yet another Christian cross, and this is from Michigan. It's obviously a crucifixion scene. No wonder that early Christian missionaries exactly in the Michigan area repeatedly report that they found already the locals writing full passages from the Bible in some sort of language that was some sort of writing that was very similar to Middle Eastern alphabets. And as you saw, plenty of tablets were excavated from the very same area with exactly that type of writing. Another pre-Columbian Native American artifact. Garcilaso de la Vega was the son of a Spanish conquistador and an Inca noble lady born in the early years of the conquest. He tells us about a very precious and special artifact that the Incas were keeping with great reverence. It was a white marble Christian cross. After they were defeated by the conquistadors, that cross was taken away from them, but even the Spanish respected it greatly without having any doubt at all that it is a Christian cross, and even built the main cathedral over there to house this cross. So obviously the Incas were very well aware about the Christianity even before the Spanish conquest. Peter Martyr d'Anghiera is one of the many who confirms that the native Indians knew very well about Christ when the missionaries already arrived. He gives as an example the Cozumel Islands in the Yucatan Peninsula. He says, they had an image of Jesus Christ and were bowing down in front of him. They knew very well about the Holy Trinity as well. They also knew how God manifested in flesh in the form of his Son. There is no end to the artifacts confirming the constant connections between the old and the new world. Now here we start the so-called Roman section. Although Roman is a bit misleading because what we call Roman Empire was just one of the provinces of the Empire of the Survivors. These coins were found in Ohio. Several hundred antique urns found in the waters of Rio de Janeiro. And all these antique style ruins were found in America. There are a lot of antique aqueducts in America, mainly concentrated in Mexico. These are those very same so-called Roman aqueducts in Europe. The style of building is the same, the technology, absolutely everything is one-to-one the same. And yet these Caligari supporters are trying to convince us that these are colonial structures, although as far as I understand, the one aqueduct in Mexico, in the capital, is clearly connected to the ancient city. But even some of the others, if they are not clearly connected with ancient pre-Columbian cities, still their very construction poses a lot of questions. What does it mean that they are categorized as colonials? Did those conquistadors and the reformators who came to plunder and kill and destroy everything, were they building antique structures in their spare time? I beg your pardon, but just look at this construction. Do you see the ants on the top? Those are human. This is gigantic. This requires advanced engineering knowledge that you don't acquire just by crossing the ocean as a priest or a conquistador. This construction is managed by engineers who are already well experienced with this, who belong to a tradition that has been building this before in Europe. Just look at the structures. Is it really that difficult to connect the dots and figure out that it is the absolutely same culture that built the absolutely same things in Europe, did the same thing in America? Moreover, they are equally preserved, so we can also conclude that they were done more or less in the same historic period. I don't really understand how it can make sense to anybody that this could be colonial. What did the missionaries do? Quick courses on antique building techniques? And it is the same with the antique statues that are found all over South America. They were also in the North America, but they took them down. Officially, they are also labeled as colonial, but these are clearly antique, what most people call Roman style statues. Look at the helmets, look at the spears. This is a Neptune, pagan god, from the point of view of the missionaries and conquistadors. So did those absolutely fanatic missionaries who were burning people alive with their books because they were pagan, did they in their off time, in their free time, wear miniskirts, forget that they're Christians and build statues of the pagan gods? It's not just Neptune, also many ladies that cannot be called decent according to Christian standards. They are barely wearing anything. Also, these aqueducts were built by somebody who cared for the local population, and the conquistadors and the missionaries did not care for it. They were killing them, they were burning them alive. So if we listen to the official history, these missionaries and conquistadors and reformationists were cruel murderers during the day, and then in their spare time, in the evening probably, all of a sudden they acquired magically knowledge how to build antique statues and aqueducts and started building them for those very few of the natives who have survived. This is an old illustration showing what did they do with the antique statues in North America. They took them down and placed some new colonial statues that would fit the new history, and after that they said that there was no antique culture here before us. We created all that. Interesting house in South America. The wooden decoration is identical to that on the Russian traditional houses. Same in San Francisco. The chemical composition of each gold mine is slightly different, although it is always gold. It is slightly different, so by having a piece of gold, it is possible to determine where did it come from. So no wonder that some ancient Russian artifact surprised the scientists who were testing them, because the gold was from Peru. And these were ancient artifacts. These are ancient Mayan figurines exhibited in the Museum of Toronto. The people that are depicted wear turbans. Yet one more vivid example of the connections between Asia and the so-called, maybe so-called ancient Native American world. Now the friend of the fellow with the turban on his right side is having a snake figure on his forehead, very similar to what the Egyptians wore. And a few more examples of unusual headwear amongst native Indians. And the people who are having those turban-like things on their heads are also sitting with their legs crossed like in Asia. South America is also rich in megalithic stone towers. Officially, it is considered that the purpose of their existence is unknown, and there are many of them, just dozens and dozens next to each other. Same situation like these towers in Tibet. They are also very high, also with unknown purpose of existence, and also many of them are found in groups. Same in Bologna, medieval Italy. Look at the quantity of the towers. And same like Tibet, they are some 60 meters high, the tallest, and many of them, large groups of them. Same in Afghanistan, some 60 meters in height maximum, and again standing in groups. Absolutely same situation in Ireland. Many towers, a height up to 40-50 meters. Official purpose unknown. Same towers in Northern Africa. Teotihuacan is a very famous tourist attraction, but 99% of what the visitors see is the fantasy of the restoration teams who thought that it must look like that, and so they rebuilt it in this fashion. As far as the advanced knowledge that the people who built it, the tourists are pointed out towards different stars that could connect to different elevated platforms. But in reality, there are so many stars and so many platforms that one can fantasize endlessly about such meanings. And after being confused in such way, miss the main point. Some of the main points can be seen on the back side, where some of the original blocks are still to be seen. And these are same style, enormous megalithic blocks with very fine work on them, as if they have been cut by some sort of advanced tools or cast out of geopolymer. In both cases, these were people with advanced technical knowledge. And who were those people, namely? Well, according to mainstream history, those were the people like this, living in this sort of huts. While in the residential area of the old Teotihuacan, we see completely different. We see large platforms covered with 5 centimeter thick cement. Even the walls and the floors of all houses are covered with thick layer of cement. In the original writings of those who excavated the city for the first time, we read that even the ceilings above the wooden frame, there was a thick layer of cement as well. So why are we being told that the hut residents built Teotihuacan? Is there any sort of research or basis for these stories that we are being told? Well, those who have done actual on-field research are telling completely different things. Miguel Covarrubias says that mysterious foreign elite, whose motherland was situated somewhere else in the east, stood at the top of the new civilized society formed on the basis of the cultural fusion of the two cultural streams, local and foreign. Now that makes sense. The rough primitive work, that is typically local style, and the perfectly shaped blocks, yes, that is foreign influence. So actually many historians are doing their work. It is simply not included in the proper history of the school books. That's all. Next, the Swiss explorer Sigvald Line, who many years conducted excavation on the territory of the city, says the local population was altogether driven out from the valley by some unknown alien people, who over time created a brilliant civilization of the classic era. Many anthropologists are also noticing the obvious parallel between the Asian and the American arts. They could not have developed independently. They were intertwined. Paul Rivard, Jose Imbellione, Carl Gentze, Leonard Adam, many of them. And also, what about the extensive network of tunnels below Teotihuacan? Those are reported to stretch for tens of kilometers. Well, they're locked up and there is no access for them for study or any research. An interesting Mayan archaeological site in Mexico is Palenque. In the famous Temple of Inscriptions, couple of images are found where it seems that the people wearing spacesuits and using sophisticated technical equipment could be depicted. But what about the actual burial on the top of which the famous carving has been found? We are being told that a Mayan noble person is buried there, but why? On the basis of what? When the research of the skeleton was first conducted, the person who did it said that the remains are distinctly different from those of a Maya noble, and the teeth did not have any of the semi-precious stone inlays that all Maya nobles had. Today the researchers of course have no access to this skeleton and as a matter of fact to the full temple of inscriptions. Those who dare to suggest that the actual burial was of a person belonging to this race of gods, this advanced technical civilization that came to give knowledge to the local tribes, such people are categorized as conspirators, while the actual artifacts are locked up. I would like to know on the basis of what the people who want to know the truth are labeled as conspirators and those who actually hide the artifacts are labeled as scientists. It seems quite the opposite to me because people who hide things, those are the conspirators. The survivors of Atlantis and Hyperborea were building pyramids all over the world, and America is not an exception. We are always being told by the mainstream so-called science that all these structures had a religious purpose only. But the way this is presented is so limited that it's actually misleading, because yes, the ancient people did consider the energies that they harvested from the environment as sacred, and they did show profound respect for them. However, the pyramids seem to be mostly technical installations. The ancient pyramids bear remarkable resemblance with our latest high-tech structures. The Weiss pyramid is a modern high-tech facility. There is an absolutely massive pyramid in the Mexican city of Cholula. It is covered with a thick layer of clay. According to mainstream history, this pyramid was first discovered in year 1910. But how is that possible if 100 years before that the famous German explorer Alexander Humboldt described it clearly as a pyramid? He also described it as having 4 platforms. That means that it is entirely possible that this very thick layer of clay appeared during the last 100 years. This is a large earth mass. In old manuscripts kept in the Vatican, this Cholula pyramid is also clearly described, and it is described as a pyramid. However, this information is absolutely absent from the so-called history that is presented to us by the mainstream so-called science. Instead of the information about the Great Pyramid of Cholula, the little old information that we have access to, the mainstream so-called science are presenting us with versions about this clay covering that are not supported by anything except fantasy, and the version is that the Spanish organized this cover with the clay upon their arrival. Or alternatively, another fairy tale is offered that the native Indians, when they heard that the Spanish are arriving, they covered it with clay themselves, which is also not supported by any historic documents, and as well is impossible to complete in short terms due to the large amount of clay that is piled up on the top of the pyramid. This pyramid is actually the biggest pyramidal structure in the world. Moreover, the thickness of the clay layer is many meters in height. The question arises, was the pyramid covered with clay in very recent times from above? Were they concerned that it is still functioning and producing positive energy? What do I mean by functioning? Well, let's see what can we find out about the tunnels in it. Extensive and complex network of tunnels with a total length of some at least 8 kilometers is found under the Pyramid of Cholula. Both mainstream historians and the local guides who have heard it from them are trying to assure everybody that this network of channels was dug out by the archaeologists in the course of their excavations on the site. Again, absolutely no mention that the 16th century historian was already describing them. The very well respected Alexander Humboldt also mentions them some 100-200 years before they were supposedly dug out. Another Russian researcher actually mentioned that the archaeologists were not making these tunnels. Some of them are now, by the way, locked without access. They were not making them, they were just cleaning the old tunnels. Also, the tunnels often have a very smooth walls. It seems that they were a part of the original design, and it is only in the places where they were later on added for the tourists that the walls are rough. If they were indeed dug out by modern archaeologists, they wouldn't unnecessarily complicate their work by additionally working on the walls of the channels. And by the way, digging 8 kilometers of tunnels would be unprecedented archaeological work that would take gigantic resources that they didn't have at their disposal. I mean, there are countless proofs that these tunnels are not modern. Also, they cross each other at very particular, is exactly measured angles. And there are particular, plans that they follow. Also, some of the entries are partially visible. Obviously, they are not made now. Moreover, the maps of the tunnels were made later on. Why would they make a research of their own tunnels? And still not all tunnels are on this map. But most importantly, acoustic tests were performed inside the tunnel of the pyramid. Obviously, they wouldn't make such tests if these were really modern tunnels dug by the archaeologists just to search for treasures inside. Mainstream establishment is not only well aware that these are ancient tunnels, but also they know very well what kind of technology the survivors were using, and that is why they tested if the tunnels are still functioning and what are they doing exactly. And of course, needless to say that the results of those tests about the behavior of sound waves inside the tunnels of the Cholula Pyramid are neither available to the public nor the full tests are mentioned much at all. Instead of relevant information, we are given historical fictions that we see all those people had some strange mania for building big things in reverence to fantasy gods that did not exist and things like that. The local people in Cholula still remember from their forefathers the real history of the pyramid. It was built by very tall people, 7 of them, who came running, escaping some sort of terrible flood disaster. Another large pyramid or pyramidal structure may be made of earth and cased with stones or geopolymer stones on the outside is still waiting to be studied in the region of Lamana, Ecuador. No wonder that mainstream history does not seem to be excited by the site at Lamana and doesn't show enthusiasm in studying it, because again, people who appear to be wearing space suits are found in the area. together with the writings in whatever some people call pre-Sanskrit or Paleo-Sanskrit, or this ancient runic or pre-runic writing that is found all over the world. In other words, even if they find a small bone that they can name somehow to have some connection with the human history, they will make costly documentaries and broadcast them on the main channels, conclusively proving that's what we were, namely animals and nothing else. And when artifacts are found suggesting that we were divine beings with amazing powers, mainstream so-called historians just pretend that they do not exist, and the purpose of all that is to make this out of us. That program was successfully implemented by the means of the mass media, and this is what nowadays humans have been turned into. These are the amazing results of the combined endeavors of the various branches of the memory wiping brainwashing machine that has many branches, some of which are cooking new history, and also the fashion branch. The lifelines that we found all over the globe are there in America as well. This is how they would look. They look on the ground, on ground level. And at this point, I must request you to view the rest of the video only in full resolution. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the details that I'm talking about. This particular square here in the middle of nowhere has a side of 10 kilometers. The vegetation on both sides is distinctly different, so again the lifelines are influencing the natural world around them. This is a very good example of the difference between a lifeline and a modern road. This is a lifeline and this is the modern road. Now here the lifelines again seem to be connected to various things on Earth. This water reservoir is some 100 meters long and is suspiciously regularly shaped. Probably it is artificially made. This could be traces of some ruin. Again, somewhere in the desert in America, lifelines. This is a modern piece of infrastructure, but I don't think this small farm would need this sophisticated crossing here. So these are definitely not roads. These are definitely not roads. Quite an interesting place, one triangle, then something strange here, which seems to be a new water dam, modern, next to one that we have inherited from the survivors, because most likely these are ancient ruins. And then yet another triangle with modern infrastructure on the top of the older one, probably. The thickness of these lines is 100 meters, so this is gigantic. And this is found in the vicinity, 130 meters in diameter. Remains of an ancient dam out there in the desert now, but this has been a river once upon a time, and at that time there were people who were building dams. Again interesting, Where the plateau has eroded all around, there are no lines, but where the old surface has survived, there are lines. A modern airport. But has it been built on the remains of an older structure? This is the old. Probably the old terminals were here. Is this another old runway that didn't get a modern airport made on it? The width of the runway here is some 20 meters. Now this is again out nowhere in unpopulated area of America, and again so many dams on a river that no longer exists. They are over a kilometer long, each of them. We see some complex also. Maybe they were built over time as the river was getting smaller and smaller or something like that. So many dams. Some figure here. Well, apparently the people who were building these dams lived on the area for a long time, because this is when the river was later on much smaller. They built a smaller dam. Again, the lines connected to the dams. The lines here are 20 meters wide. I mean, this is old infrastructure. This is in the middle of nowhere. This cannot be streets, such complicated wide boulevards where nobody has lived for ages. Again, out there nowhere, really in a deserty place, some sort of traces of who has been doing something here. Now this is in the cold regions of Canada. Very interesting. The lines are on land that is now partially submerged. So there is no question of car roads, most obviously. Either these lines were made when this was all land, or they were made from above. Still in the same region, and this is this line is at least some 10 kilometers long, out there in the dense forest. Who is making that? Who is maintaining it? All these uninhabited regions of Canada seem to be all marked by this line. For example, this one goes on for at least 6 kilometers. Dead straight line. I mean, if this was something modern done by the forestry department or something like that, it would follow the terrain. It wouldn't be dead straight. But it is. and remains of ancient fields. Farming seems to be somehow connected to the lines. This is out there in the very cold regions of Canada. I would sincerely doubt that this is a modern infrastructure who would travel that far to, till the land in very cold places where basically nothing can grow. Even people don't live there. And of course, the most famous part of the lifelines are the Nazca lines in Peru. But they're not just lines. In many places, they are connected to structures in the ground, like this one, that is also officially with unknown purpose. At places, the lifelines turn into geoglyphs. All this is in America, even this Indian Sri Yantra. This is in Oregon and is huge. The side of the square is 20 kilometers. And it all continues underwater as well. This is off the coast of America. The people who made the lifelines also built a lot of canals, especially in the coastal cities of America. There are plenty of them. Also very nice link, full website about the ancient canal builders under number 27 in the description. Do you notice the straight lines of the inside canal? We have inherited that from the survivors. But again, it really seems that some areas have been submerged in very, very recent times. And that is why now the canals are only visible as deeper places underwater. These images are from Florida and California, mostly San Francisco. And in both places we see something very similar, partially submerged canals and some strange dots along the canals. Now, the same dots are found as geoglyphs in the area of Titicaca in South America. And this is how these North American canals look on ground level. Really, most likely that the ocean level was much lower when they were built. You see how they are partially submerged? And also on whatever is relatively more elevated, then the modern infrastructure has been literally built on the top of the old one. Now this is the most puzzling photo of all. This is how it looks on the ground level, those areas that are semi-submerged now with canals and signs of human activity in older times. We still see the electricity poles sticking out. So, since how long are we using electricity? If this is from the era that we are using electricity, it means that just a couple of 100 years ago, 100 years ago, these areas were above water. Or what are these electricity poles from before? Really, who lived here? It shouldn't have been that far away in the past if the poles are still sticking out. And officially the water levels did not rise so much in recent times. I would recommend you a very interesting documentary called From the Brink of Extinction or Ruins of Old Earth. It is found under link number 25 of the description. Now, as the deforestation of the Amazon basin continues, gigantic geoglyphs are surfacing. Now, sometimes the height of these structures can reach 20 or more meters. They're made of earth only, and they're fully consistent with the descriptions, the oldest descriptions that we have about the inhabitants of the Amazon basin. They had amazing rich culture. They had buildings built out of some sort of maybe geopolymer or something. The first travelers called them stone buildings, but stones are barely found in that area, so it could have been geopolymer, and it was very densely populated. They had amazing, beautiful cities, and there were so many of them that the banks of the river, as the first travelers were sailing along, were black from the crowds of people that were gathering. The Acambaro collection is yet another priceless treasure of the ancient American culture. Unfortunately, it is absolutely denied any scientific research because they have been declared as forgery based on an article that was published in a very prestigious scientific magazine, where a so-called scientist announced that he did spend a day or two viewing the collection and decided that it is not genuine based on facts that he listed, and those facts are sheer and obvious lies that anybody can check, like that they look newish, that they are not broken, that they have no earth remaining on them, and many other straightforward lies. He has obviously not even studied the collection because it consists of some 40,000 items. It was only some Russian researchers recently that managed to open a couple of the sealed boxes, again sealed by the government officials. Why are they sealing if these are supposedly modern forgeries? So within just a couple of weeks, they managed to photograph and only view very briefly only 2,000 items. So how could that so-called scientist claim that he has studied them in a day or two? We will have a full episode about the coexistence of humans and all kinds of interesting dinosaurs. To understand fully why the history of Americas has been distorted in such a monstrous way, please view the earlier episodes of the Survivor series, and especially the one that deals with the specific point in history where a small group of Jesuit monks simply substituted the history of the entire planet with historical fiction.
Mutayam Barivana